Musicians, have you heard the theory that's been going around the music business recently that, if true, would actually bring everything we know about music marketing to a screeching halt? I'm talking, of course, about the dead internet theory. Now, a lot of musicians have gone down the rabbit hole and know exactly what this is, and a lot of musicians have no idea what this is. But what's important to realize is that people are waking up and seeing patterns that are happening on the internet. However, depending on how you're interpreting those patterns, could mean the difference between success or continued failure. So what if actually understanding how the dead internet theory really worked allowed you to position yourself for the future so that you could actually take advantage of the future and not be left behind? So that's what I'm going to be covering in today's video, is how we can look at the dead internet theory, what's actually happening, and how we could actually move forward considering what's really happening. So first of all, let's dive into just a little bit about what the theory actually is. For those of you that don't know, the dead internet theory fundamentally is this idea that the internet will be so populated by bots and AI and synthetic and fake profiles that there won't be any human activity left on the internet, or it'll be like the 0.01% of activity on the internet. And as a consequence of this, the internet will die. Now, the word is still out on what exactly that means for the internet to die. Does that mean the AI short circuits and all of a sudden the internet, like it's like in South Park when there's just one big router for all of the internet? It's like does someone unplug that? Is that what it means to quote unquote kill the internet and the internet dying? I don't know. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I can tell you this. No matter what happens with AI in the future, the internet is not going away. Now, what things are at jeopardy are things like social media, because a large portion of the creation of social media was to see things from other people, to see things from people who are, your friends and family and band members that you like and all this kind of different stuff, right? And over time, it's just changed into regular media. But what happens if social media profiles get so diluted and saturated with artificial fake avatars, and the avatars get pretty good in distinguishing, or you're not able to distinguish between reality and AI? This becomes an issue. People start to distrust the internet and social media specifically even more than they already do, okay? So there is evidence that because of the adoption of AI, that there is a large increase of pace of what percentage of the internet is mostly made by AI and mostly not made by AI. Now, here's what we need to understand. Here's the reality of the circumstances right now. AI is in a bubble. Now, some of you guys are like, what does that mean? You mean like it's in a bubble? No. What that means is everyone is all hyped up on it. I want you to think about Bitcoin, okay? Way back in the day, I would say like 2016, and even really before that, but the big wave was around 2016, where people were hyping up Bitcoin as it's going to be this digital currency and it's going to be more valuable than X, Y, and Z, and all this stuff is going to happen, right? People started to see the potential future utility of it and went hardcore in investing in it, and there was a bit of euphoria in the air, which is just the term that means everyone's just like, oh my God, nothing could go wrong. And people buy into it, people buy into it, people buy into it, and at the very first sight of a dip, what we call a correction, in investing, when people like, oh, okay, everything's not that amazing. As soon as there's a come down, there's an avalanche of people that are like, oh no, this is all a sham, none of this works. And they start pulling out their money, and then it just goes down, right? But guess what? Bitcoin, we thought Bitcoin was over when it crashed from 20,000 down to like 7,000. Well, it's at 115,000 today. And so we often overestimate what's going to happen with a new piece of technology in the first couple of years, like the first 3 to 5 years, really, but then underestimate the level of adoption and I would call tameness of the technology over a 10-year period, or even just its efficiency. Think about Amazon. Amazon was birthed out of the dot-com bubble, right? In the early 2000s, people were putting a bunch of money behind like Amazon, eBay, Google, but then they were also putting a bunch of money behind pets.com and a bunch of other websites that no one really knew how they made money. It was just like, well, I have a domain name. Oh, that's a business. I bought the domain name, right? So what happens is everyone buys into this, And then everyone starts to realize, okay, like where's the actual profit from these companies? And then everyone started to realize, oh, there's really not very much profit from all these companies. It's really a bunch of hype that's been happening, right? But guess what happened? All these internet companies in the early 2000s crashed out because the dot-com bubble burst. But what survived? eBay, Amazon, and these are powerhouses in technology space today. So like what happens with AI is there's going to be a huge adoption wave. People are going to be like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. It's going to save humanity and all this amazing stuff. And then once people realize that, I don't know, for anybody that is scared of AI, I just recommend that you go use AI so that you see just how unscared you should be right now. Like when people think ChatGPT is going to take over the world, I'm like, have you talked to ChatGPT to any extensive degree? Because if I have a long conversation with ChatGPT, I may end up cussing it out at least like 2/3 of the time. No, I'm just kidding. But like, it makes tons of mistakes, sometimes very simple mistakes, or it makes very simple misunderstandings because sometimes words could be interpreted two different ways and it doesn't understand which interpretation you meant. So people that think this technology is going to take over the world, I think by and large have not used it to a great extent because they would understand the technology really isn't there. And people have this idea that, well, Dax, AI is going to just exponentially increase over time, so we're just at the beginning of the curve. Well, here's what I would say. No one's ever been able to answer this question for me, which is we've already seen results in tests and experiments where if AI uses other AI as a source for its answers, because, you know, ChatGPT, mostly, funny enough, like 70% of the source material that AI pulls from or ChatGPT pulls from is Reddit. I just think that's so funny. But anyway, a good chunk of, literally everything ChatGPT pulls from is from the internet, right? But what happens if the internet gets populated by mostly AI material, right? We've already seen in controlled experiments where if AI uses other AI as a source material, if that it turns into a loop where it's AI feeding off of AI, feeding off of AI in this little loop, it does not get better exponentially over time. It gets exponentially worse over time. So no one's been able to explain to me how we're going to reach this singularity moment of like machines learning from machines, creating machines that learn from machines, and so on and so forth, if right now AI can't even learn from itself without devolving into absolute chaos and madness. So just if anybody's like worried, just think about that. Hopefully that'll help you sleep better at night tonight. But here's the reality of what's actually happening. People are seeing a behavior and they're seeing, okay, people are adopting AI to a widespread degree. So a lot of the internet is going to have AI material in it, right? But there's a perception that musicians have, which is that like, okay, well, therefore, you know, I shouldn't worry about the internet. But here's what I would say. There's two sides to this coin. On one side, there is evidence that 49% of millennials and 43% of Gen Z are doing regular digital detoxes. Now that means they're doing activities without their phones. A little glimmer of humanity, isn't that great? But basically what's happening is we're reaching a point in human history. We've had these social medias for about 20 years. And having it this long, I think people are starting to just reach a saturation point where they're completely burnt out on it. Does that mean people are never going to use it again? Absolutely not. Just because for a year and a half I ate way more Chick-fil-A than any human being probably should have been eating in a 365-day period of time. I got to my Red membership quite quickly. I'll just put it that way. That doesn't mean I never eat Chick-fil-A. It did mean that I took some breaks and had to go figure out some other probably more healthy things at home to eat other than Chick-fil-A all the time. But you get the idea. I still eat Chick-fil-A today. In fact, I had it like a couple days ago, a couple days in a row. But the point is people with social media will reach a point, I think, within the next 5 years where it's the generations that have been on it since the early 2000s or even since the 90s, we are all kind of reaching a point where we're realizing the true value in life is not found on the social media platforms. So we have to distinguish the fact that people are going to, yes, stop using technology as much, and there's already evidence that that's happening, but that technology like that's not going to go away. So they're going to exist in sort of a cohesive sort of manner. So here's what you can do knowing that, okay, a lot of the dystopian, there's no humans left on the internet and it's all just fake stuff, and so there's no way to market your music, for example, because there's no real people on the internet. That's, we've kind of discussed, as a bit dystopian, right? The reality is more like AI is in a bubble. The bubble is going to burst. And what's going to happen is, I think we're going to go from everyone thinking that ChatGPT is going to rule the world to understanding that ChatGPT will probably in it of itself have a bit of a bubble pop, and people are going to realize that their value is not being this all-in-one super mega AI that can answer any question about any topic over any degree of expertise, right? I think what they're going to find out is the best uses of AI are finding little specialized niches so that you could have knowledge banks that inform these AIs that are based on those specific niches. So sorry to get technical in this video, but the whole idea here is that we need to understand AI adoption is not going anywhere. We are reaching an oversaturation where like people maybe are going to get sick of AI generated images or AI generated music or things like that. But also the AI will start to get less detectable in the same breath. Just like auto-tune becomes less and less detectable depending on how extreme the settings are on it, right? So once we use AI, like fine-tuning auto-tune is used on vocals, I think we're going to start to see what AI really looks like in a society. And so social media platforms may have a shelf life, and I don't know that for a fact, but what can you do? First of all, focus on humanity. What I mean by that is, this is actually going to be really funny. The only way to really emphasize your humanity is to show how it's not your artificial version. So what I mean by this is, I actually recommend that every single artist create an AI avatar version of themselves that has an AI voice clone of them to talk to their fans, because they need to see what it sounds like when it's clearly not you. Do you understand? You want to create contrast in their head, which is very real, of here's what AI Dax sounds like, right? And so that way, when you see me talk to you for real, like I'm doing right now, it's a very easy thing to distinguish, right? And so then you can use the fact that they know it's AI for your own purposes, like for marketing reasons. If they know it's AI, then the AI avatar version of you can do and say things and get away with things that you can't, because they know it's the AI version of you. So from a comedic standpoint, you could do things that are a little bit more outlandish or say silly things or stupid things that you may feel weird to say on camera, but really it's just your AI clone is saying it, and then you get to be like repulsed by what your AI clone says, and you'd be like, oh, AI clone, don't say that. That's going to repulse the fans. You know what I mean? That's actually emphasizing your humanity by emphasizing you're showcasing the artificial side of what can be done with your brand in this day and age, but you're contrasting that with what you really are, right? So emphasize your humanity, especially when it comes to things like DMing people. This is a strategy that's been insanely effective, but the trust of it is being called into question if we get too formulaic with our speech with people. We need to make sure that if we're messaging people, we're using voice messages. And here's the thing. I was talking about this with a client recently, there are certain frequencies in your voice that are perceived they're perceived unconsciously because they're in different frequency bands that you can't really hear on a conscious level, but your brain picks them up still, right? So if you send a voice message, it is going to sound vastly different if you sent like an AI voice clone trying to be a voice message, right? They would be able to tell the difference between the two just based on the raw acoustics of your voice. There's almost like an uncanny valley effect of the voice with AI, right? So you sending voice messages in the DMs, or even maybe a picture of yourself just like, doing whatever, can be a fun way to emphasize your humanity in all these different ways that you're doing this. When it comes down to your emails, right? Write emails like a person. Don't try to write, like we can all tell when someone's using Claude or ChatGPT to write their emails for them. It sounds so painfully formulaic and hypey sometimes, it's just painful. So don't do that, right? Write out your emails in a way that if you were messaging your best friend, like this is 1999 and you're emailing your best friend about something, right? And people will say, well, like, is email an old technology? No. In fact, here's what I need you guys to understand. If social media is going away at some point within the next few years, or at least is going to change to an unrecognizable degree, and you have not built an audience that you have transferred from social media into your email list, if you lose the ease of access to that audience because of the shifts that are going to happen with social media, you are far behind. Because the artists who are successful right now are figuring out how to grow their audience on social media, but don't leave them there. They bring them into their email list so that no matter if, TikTok goes down, Facebook changes the algorithm, if Meta decides that Facebook is no longer going to be a thing and it's going to be a virtual reality, metaverse that people have to, whatever, right? No matter what happens, I guarantee you, if they change the infrastructure where it's like we don't really have followers and friends anymore, it's like you just kind of go into this metaverse community. So it's like if you were just to go hang out in public, except you're doing that on the internet. So there's not really friends and followers and things like that anymore. It's just like going into a digital world. Well, now what the heck are you going to do with all those followers, right? If they make that an obsolete function in the future that we're heading in, where if you have their email address, it doesn't matter what Meta does. You can email them and be like, isn't what Meta's doing crazy? And they would be able to receive those kind of things. So we have to focus on our humanity, but we have to also build a list. If you have put this off, put it off no longer. It is the most important thing in your music business right now to build up your email list as big as you possibly can. Because at some point, the ease of access in the next maybe 5 years, I'm going to make a longer prediction here, maybe 5 to 10 years, that access will be severely limited, totally different. And like I said, it'll change the way that we're doing our marketing. The underlying psychological principles of what makes marketing work will not change, but the approaches that we'll have to take to execute those things will change as we move into the future. So the best hedge against the future is actually building an email list, because no matter what it's like, no matter what the world's doing on the outside, you messaging someone on an email list is like having a key inside their house, right? Like you can talk to them on the inside like, wow, isn't it crazy out there? But if the only way you have access to them is when they're out in the wilds being bombarded by everybody else, that is going to become an increasingly losing proposition for you. And then the final thing that I would say is focus on in-person events and experiences. Me and my band, I shouldn't even really be telling you guys this, but I actually really like my audience and I want you guys to do well. I am recommending that people rethink the typical live show performance structure. Especially in rock and metal, it's become pretty formulaic and played out. And I think just as someone who's done 700 of them, it's pretty boring. Except when you perform, obviously. But like, there's just everything in between is like, I want that next band. You know what I mean? It's just, it could be better, right? So focusing your attention to how can I make my show better? How can I make my live experiences better? How can I make the experience, even online, more human and help me build my list? But how do I increase my experiences, whether that's virtual or in person? But how do I also start hosting more in-person events? Because you know what? No matter what happens on the internet with all the social media stuff, you can't fake it in the real flesh. When you're standing flesh and blood in front of another human being, flesh and blood, there is no faking it. There is no AI voice clone. There is no reading a teleprompter. Well, I mean, if you're a singer, sometimes there's those prompters. But you get the idea, right? It's raw. It's real. There's a person in front of you, right? It's sink or swim time, where everything can be so calculated on the internet that people will have a perception that there is no difficulty in what's being presented. Even if it took a lot of technical legwork to get it to be that way, people will perceive less effort in it because the technology is so efficient now. So we really need to emphasize our humanity. We need to build in-person events and increase our experiences that lean on our humanity, even if they're online. But most importantly, guys, we got to build that email list, because that way, if the future doesn't turn out anything like I've said, and any of the predictions I've made, you've still got their email address and you can adapt to how the world is when it gets there. But if you wait to build a list until it's too late, then it will be too late. So do not put that off. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and understand the dead internet theory a little bit better and how it actually will apply to your music business. And I hope that you have a little bit of optimism now that if you start to pivot and you start to already right now, before the wave gets here, prepare yourself and get these things going, you actually will set yourself up when everyone's figuring out what to do. As Warren Buffett says, you only see who's swimming naked when the tide rolls out, right? So when the tide comes in and everyone's like, oh no, and they're naked, you can be the one that's actually prepared and, built some sort of safety net and protection and know the pathway forward, because you weren't just sitting there dystopianly thinking like, well, there's no reason to build an audience online is because it's all going to be AI. And so what would it even matter? Meanwhile, the artists are over here getting as many real human beings into their email list as possible. So when social media becomes untenable in its current state, they've got their emails and it really doesn't matter what happens. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, all that kind of good YouTube-y stuff. And if you'd like some one-on-one help setting up these systems so that you can get your dream fans attracted to your brand and move them into your email list, and heck, even sell something every now and again, I want you to go ahead and hit the link that's in the description. Set up a free one-on-one call to see how we could help you out implementing these systems inside of your music business. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on another video inside of Musicians Ignite. Take care.